Aikido, the martial art created by Morihei Ueshiba, is known the world over as a unique self-defense system with the higher aim of promoting peace and harmony among peoples everywhere. Enthusiasts in more than 100 countries practice this art known for its principle of non-competition. Despite the widespread popularity of Aikido, the origin and nature of this art are not well understood among its practitioners. This videotape will present clear evidence concerning the actual techniques practiced by the founder as he was developing the modern form of Aikido. Our search takes us back to Japan of the pre-World War II era. During this period, the founder operated his own private school known as the Kobukan Dojo in the Shinjuku district of Tokyo. At this stage of his career, Ueshiba was in the process of modifying the complex techniques of Daito-ryu Aikijutsu he had learned from his teacher, Sokaku Takeda. Among Ueshiba's students of the 1930s were many prominent people from religious, business, political, and military circles. It was in connection with his teaching duties at the Army Toyama School that Ueshiba compiled a small training manual entitled Budo in 1938. A photography crew provided by the Army visited Ueshiba's dojo to capture his techniques on film. It is this booklet that provides the key to understanding the technical development of Aikido. Budo was prepared for Prince Kaya, a descendant of the imperial family, who was a high-ranking army officer and also a student of Ueshiba. Kaya Nomiya, as he was known, became the superintendent of the Toyama School, where Ueshiba taught in 1942. Budo contains some 50 techniques that are notable for their similarity to the modern forms of Aikido. It is the only book containing complete technical sequences performed by Ueshiba himself, and as such, is an invaluable technical reference. During the late 1930s, Morihei Ueshiba was experimenting with the weapons techniques of various classical schools, particularly those of the Kashima Shinto-ryu. In fact, fully 1/3 of Budo's techniques deal with the use of arms, including the knife, sword, spear, and bayonet. Ueshiba retired to the small village of Iwama in Ibaraki Prefecture in 1942 to devote himself to farming, meditation, and training. In 1946, following World War II, a local teenager named Morihiro Saito enrolled in the Ueshiba Country Dojo. Due to his flexible work schedule with the Japanese National Railways, the talented young Saito was able to engage in long years of intensive training at the side of the founder. Saito Sensei, now a 9th degree black belt holder, spent a total of 24 years as Ueshiba's student. During this time, Saito Sensei and his family served the Ueshibas in Iwama in their personal life. One of today's leading exponents of Aikido, Morihiro Saito has traveled extensively in Japan and abroad, teaching the complex technical system developed by Ueshiba, which includes both empty-handed and weapons techniques. Saito Sensei attaches great importance to Budo as a technical resource and refers to it frequently during his teaching seminars. In 1999, Saito Sensei published a book titled Takemusu Aikido Special Edition, the companion of this videotape, which provides an in-depth analysis of Budo. In this remarkable program, Saito Sensei reads and demonstrates the 50 techniques of Budo. Please observe closely the photographs of the founder from Budo included as a reference. These are the authentic techniques of Aikido created by Morihei Ueshiba Sensei, as demonstrated by one of his foremost students. In this videotape, I would like to demonstrate the techniques of Budo. Through these demonstrations, I believe you will be able to understand the evolution of the founder's techniques. Moreover, I think you will be able to understand how important this book will be to the future study and development of Aikido. 1. Kamae. Fill your body with ki and open your feet in a roppo position and face your opponent in an Aiki Hanmi Irimi stance. When assuming a stance, remember that the situation changes according to the will of God, depending on the time, position, level of the land, and opponent's force at that time. There are several ways of moving your feet, including outward and inward body movements and turns. These should be taught in practice. Note: when practicing, assume either a left or right stance according to your opponent's position and the distance between you and him. Make sure always to assume a roppo stance upon completing a technique. You are at a disadvantage if you stand before your opponent with your whole body facing to the front, because you will be open to many attacks in this position. 2. Irimi. Uke. Grab your opponent's left wrist with your right hand. Shite. Put power into the fingertips of your left hand while thrusting your palm out diagonally upward to the right. At the same time, step deeply in close to Uke's body with your left foot and face to the right. At this point, pay attention to your rear. Grab Uke's wrist with your right hand from below while twisting your left hand further to the right in order to escape from his right hand. The instant you escape, execute a strike to your opponent's head. Grab your opponent's collar from the rear with your left hand, or hold his back, while stepping in with your right foot. Push his neck downward with the inside of your right elbow and throw him down. At this time, it is important that you put power into the fingertips of your right hand and extend your arms inward. Three. Sayu no henka. Uke. Proceed as shown in photo 2. Shite. Concentrate your mind on the fingertips of your left hand while thrusting it forward to the right in a semicircular manner. At the same time, turn your palm upward while turning your body to the right in a large motion while pivoting on your left foot. Pay attention to your rear. After changing your body position, it is important that your feet are in a correct stance and that your posture is stable. Uke. When Shite is finishing the technique, advance slightly forward in order to make it easy for him to move. Note, you should practice both sides, left and right, using an irimi or entering movement as well as tai no henko. 4. Irimi tenka. Enter in irimi with your left foot and then turn your body. Shomen. 5. Face your opponent as shown in photo 1. Shite. Step forward with your right foot while striking your opponent's forehead with your right tegatana or hand blade and execute an atemi to his side with your left fist. Uke. Block your opponent's right tegatana with your right hand. Shite. Cut down your opponent's front elbow with your right tegatana and then grab his wrist while controlling his right elbow with your left hand. Step forward diagonally to the right with your left foot and bring his right arm down in front of your abdomen. Advance further forward while pinning him to the mat. This is called Dai Ippo. Then turn to your opponent's right and place his right arm between your knees and strike his head with your right tegatana. Note, you must initiate the attack using both hands and feet at the same time. When you pin your opponent down on the mat, you must place his arm perpendicular to his body. Six. When your opponent strikes with shomenuchi, enter in irimi while blocking his tegatana with your right hand and pin him as described in technique number 5. 7. Shite. Lead your opponent's shomenuchi strike with your ki. Uke. Bring your right tegatana upward in a large motion while advancing one step with your right foot and strike his head. Shite. Enter in irimi to your opponent's right while executing an atemi to his side with your left fist. Strike down his tegatana with your right tegatana. Turn deeply to the rear of your opponent and push his chin strongly. Note, in an actual fighting situation, strike your opponent's face. Eight. Shite. Lead your opponent's shomenuchi with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's head with your right tegatana. Shite. Step forward with your left foot entering an irimi or turn your body as in tai no henka while striking down his right wrist with your left tegatana. Grab the back of his right hand with your left hand. Correct method of grabbing. Grab your opponent's wrist with your ring finger and little finger and press down on the base of his ring finger with your thumb. As you draw your left leg back, put your right hand over his right hand and press down on his palm so that he is forced to clench his fist. Then twist him down to the left. Next, as shown in photo 20, take a reverse handhold with your right hand. You must not let your opponent move his hands or legs. Shite. Strike your opponent's side and his head as shown in technique number 5. Uke. Block your opponent's tegatana with your right hand. Shite. Pivot in a large motion and with your right hand, cut down your opponent's hand, which he has used to block your attack. Slide down your palm to his right wrist and place your thumb under his wrist while taking his right wrist in a reverse hold. Then place his wrist in the center of your chest and with your left hand grab his forearm. Control his right arm as if putting power into your chest. Next, move backward in order to bring your opponent down and lower into a seated position at his right side while pinning his right arm with both of your arms. Shite, attack as described in technique number 9. Uke, block the attack as described in number 9. Shite, after pivoting in a large motion, grab the fingertips of your opponent's right hand with your right hand and twist it to the right and slightly up. Switch your hands and hold his palm with your left hand while striking his face with your right fist. Draw your left foot to the rear while controlling his right elbow with your right hand and move back further to bring him down. Next, lower into a seated position at the right side of your opponent and place your arms in a crossed position while controlling your opponent with your right arm. Yokomen. 11. Shite, lead the opponent's yokomen strike with your ki. Uke, step forward with your right foot while striking your opponent's left temple with your right tegatana. Shite, take a small step diagonally to the left with your left foot while sweeping his right hand with your left tegatana and strike his head with your right hand. Next, step in deeply in irimi and cut down his right tegatana to the right with your right tegatana, and at the same time execute an atemi to his side with your left fist. Throw him with your right hand. Practice yokomen as described in the section on the essence of techniques. Shite, draw out your opponent's yokomen or lateral strike with your ki. Uke, execute a yokomen strike as shown in technique number 11. Shite, step slightly to the left and cut down your opponent's right tegatana with your left tegatana while striking his head on your right hand. Grab his right wrist with your left hand while also taking hold of it with your right hand. Raise his arm up over your head while stepping diagonally forward to the right with your left foot. Then, pivoting on your left foot, turn about 180 degrees to the right to throw him in such a way that you block an opponent's attack from behind. Note: you must think of your opponent's right arm as a sword when executing the technique. Also, it is important that you control his right wrist with your thumb. When an opponent attacks you with a yokomen strike, enter as described in technique number 11. Then grab his wrist from below with your right hand while pivoting on your left foot. Apply the Dai Ippo technique. Shite. Pivot as described in technique number 10 while applying the Dai Niho technique. Shite. Execute a large irimi tenka movement as described in technique number 11, and at the same time lower your opponent's right hand completely. Grab your opponent's wrist with your right hand and the upper part of his forearm with your left hand. Step in with your left foot while felling him in the same manner as if cutting an enemy down with a two-handed sword strike. Note: the correct way of applying pressure to your opponent's right forearm. Grab his forearm, putting power into your little finger and ring finger, and apply pressure strongly against his wrist with the base of your index finger or slightly to the side of the wrist against the bone. Throwing practice. 16. Uke. Take a half step forward with your right foot and grab both of your opponent's wrists with your hands. Shite. Take a half step diagonally to the right with your right foot and then a full step diagonally forward to the right with your left foot. At the same time, grab his right wrist with your right hand. Put power into the fingertips of your left hand and raise up your opponent's right hand in the direction of his shoulder. Put power into the little finger and ring finger of your left hand and draw his right hand towards you. Grasp his wrist at the pulse point with your thumb in order to control his right hand completely. Raise his arm all the way up. Next, pivot on your left foot approximately 180 degrees and throw your opponent to the rear as if cutting down an opponent behind you. As soon as you complete the throw, pin his right hand with a reverse hold. 17. Uke. Execute the technique as described on the previous page. Shite. Pivot to the right on your left foot and throw your opponent in the manner described on the previous page. Aiki no Tanden, Aiki training. Aiki will be learned naturally as a product of training. I will explain the specifics orally. 18. When an opponent grabs your hand. 19. When an opponent grabs both your hands. 20. When an opponent attacks with a strike. 21. Yokomen training. Uke. Execute a yokomenuchi strike with your right hand. Shite. Step diagonally forward with your left foot while deflecting your opponent's right hand with your left tegatana. Then strike his head with your right tegatana. Training against rear attacks. 22. Uke. Grab your opponent's rear collar with your right hand and pull it backward. Shite. The moment your opponent pulls your back collar, pivot to the left on your right foot while stepping diagonally back and to his right. Then strike his head with your left hand and the pit of his stomach with your right hand in order to bring him down. (23) Uke. Proceed as described in technique number 22. Shite. Draw your right foot diagonally back and to the right while striking your opponent's head with your left tegatana. Draw out another opponent's attack with your right hand. Uke. Deflect your opponent's left hand with your left hand. Shite. Take a large step backward with your left foot and bend your body fully forward while shifting diagonally to the rear and right of your opponent. Apply a lock on his right arm with your right arm while striking his back with your left hand to bring him down. (24) Uke. Grab your opponent's rear collar with your right hand and push him forward. Shite. The moment your opponent attempts to grab your rear collar, step forward with your right foot and, using it as a pivot, turn to the left while striking your opponent's head with your left tegatana to bring him down. 25. Uke. Proceed as described in the previous technique. Shite. The moment your opponent attempts to grab your rear collar, turn to your right onto your right foot while entering diagonally to the right rear of your opponent. Then strike down his right hand with your right tegatana. Next, step in with your right foot to his rear while striking his head with your right hand to bring him down. (26) Uke. Grab your opponent's two hands from behind with your hands. Shite. Step back with your left foot while raising up both your hands. Next, step backward with your right foot and at the same time lower both your hands to throw your opponent forward.
(27)
27. Shite. Lead your opponent's attack with your ki. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Immediately after your opponent moves to strike you, turn your body and enter deeply to his right side while striking his wrist with your left tegatana. Pay attention to your back. Execute an atemi to his head with your right fist and bring him down to your left as described in technique number 8. Grab the sword by placing your right little and ring fingers on the hilt. Next, move to the left, passing over his head, and pin him face downward. Take the sword away from your opponent with both hands and cut his neck. (28) Shite. Proceed as in technique number 25. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Enter in irimi while striking his side. Next, bring him down as described in technique number 7. (29) Shite. Stand with your right foot forward and draw out your opponent's attack with your ki as described above. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Enter in irimi to your opponent's left while executing a strike to the pit of his stomach. Grab the hilt of the sword and strike his head with your right tegatana. 30. Train your ki while cultivating sharp eyes. Shite. Read the opponent's attack with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's head from the jodan or upper position. Shite. The moment your opponent comes to strike you, turn either to the right or left. You must practice until you become able to move calmly when exposed to the danger of dying by the sword. Explanation. There is an opening at the moment your opponent comes to strike you. I find out the enemy's opening with the same spirit as if I were drawing a sword. A piece of iron is merely a physical thing, but still has weaknesses. However, it becomes steel or a sword through the refining process. The swordsmith Masamune's fine, flawless blades were the product of countless hours of practice. The same concept applies to your training. Practice without creating any openings for your opponent. If he cuts you, make sure to cut him, and if he thrusts you, thrust him. If you cultivate this spirit, you will become a true martial artist. Yokomen Do. 31. Kuden, oral teaching. Tanken. 32. The moment your opponent thrusts you with a knife or threatens you with a gun, apply technique number 7. Apply technique number 8. Uke. Stab at your opponent's head with a knife. Shite. The moment your opponent comes to stab you, enter an irimi and grab his right forearm from below with your right hand and apply Dai Ippo. Kote. 35. Shite. Draw out his kote or wrist with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's wrist. Shite. Move your body to the left and cut his wrist. 36. Shite. Lead your opponent's right hand with your ki. Uke. Strike his head with your sword. Shite. Move your body and enter to the right while striking his head. 37. Shite. Lead your opponent's attack to your head with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's head. Shite. Enter an irimi while striking his head. I will explain the theory of cutting an opponent while avoiding being cut by his sword. Tsuki 38. Shite. Proceed as described above. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Enter an irimi and thrust your opponent's chest with your sword with the blade upward. Then immediately strike his head and execute a second thrust. Shite. Assume a right irimi stance with an aiki posture and lead your opponent's attack. Uke. Execute a chokuzuki or direct thrust. Shite. Enter an irimi and strike down his left forearm with your right tegatana. Next, grab his rear collar with your right hand and strike his head with your left tegatana. 40. Uke. Proceed as described above. shite, as described above. After attacking your opponent, grab his juken or bayonet with both hands and step in with your right foot to throw him. (41) Uke, proceed as described above. Shite, after entering an irimi as described in technique number 37, grab his bayonet from below with your left hand and draw your left foot back while applying an elbow lock with your right forearm. (42) Shite, assume a left irimi stance with an aiki posture to face your opponent. Uke, proceed as described above. Shite, enter in irimi and strike your opponent's head with your left tegatana while striking his left forearm with your right tegatana. Then grab his bayonet with both hands and step in with your right foot to bring him down. (43) You and your opponent face each other holding bayonets. Shite, read your opponent's attack with your ki. Uke, proceed as described above. Shite, the moment your opponent comes to thrust you, turn and enter an irimi to the left and thrust your opponent. The attack against a spear is almost identical to that using the bayonet. 44. Practice as described for throwing practice. Uke, grab both your opponent's hands with your hands. Shite, put power into the fingertips of both hands as you would for a throwing practice. Step diagonally forward and to the right with your left foot while raising both hands all the way up. Then, turn to the right while pivoting on your left foot and lower both your hands to support Uke's body. Then move back to the opposite side to return to the original position and repeat. (45) Both you and your opponent sit opposite each other in seiza. Uke, grab both your opponent's hands with your hands. Shite, turn your palms inward, putting power into your fingertips. Concentrate your mind and push your opponent as if swinging up a sword, thus raising both his forearms. Advance forward with your right knee to assume a handachi position and bring your opponent down to your left. After downing your opponent, open both palms slightly to the sides. Then push your right hand towards Uke's left shoulder and your left hand down and forward to your left. You must not draw your hands towards you. (46) Uke, proceed as described above. Shite, proceed in almost the same manner as the previous technique, but turn both palms outward, extending them diagonally forward to the left in order to bring down your opponent. (47) Uke, proceed as described above. Shite, raise your right hand while twisting it towards Uke's left shoulder and raise your left hand to the inside. Push your opponent forward and down to the left to bring him down. (48) Uke, proceed as described above. Shite, bring the opponent down to the right or left as if scooping something up with both hands. 49. I will teach this orally. Sei no undo. 50. Shite, grab Uke's hands with your hands. Uke, extend your right hand diagonally forward and to the left. Turn your body so that your back faces Uke's and lift him onto your back. Shite, let go of Uke's hands as he slides down your back slowly. This is really a wonderful book. These techniques represent the founder's art as of 1938, before World War II. It is said that Aikido was perfected after the war, and I think that is certainly the case, because there's a great difference between these and the techniques of the founder in his later years. Why did the founder make changes to the techniques of Budo later in his life? If we compare the differences in techniques, I think the founder's reasons will become clear. I can't go into this subject now, but if I have an opportunity in the future, I would like to clearly show the pre-war techniques of Budo and compare them with his later techniques to explain why it was the founder made these various changes. I hope I will have such an opportunity.
To have such an honored guest to be here today. He's a good friend of Nippon for many, many years. And he's the editor of Aikido Journal. Mr. Stanley Trent, thank you very much for being here. Thank you everyone for having me. Now about 7.5 hours of Iwama Aikido, some of the top, highest level of Aikido I think in the world. And for those of you who are new to Aikido, you may wonder where all this came from and how it compares with other systems of Aikido. Well, part of what I'll talk about today will cover precisely that topic. And you'll get a lot to, you'll find out a great deal about this gentleman here, the father of Morihiro Sensei.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
I have to turn the page. Okay. I would like to start out by illustrating a very important point. How many people among you here today have been to Iwama? Just raise your hand. How many people have attended a seminar by Saito Sensei? Either here. Let me ask you this one. How many people have changed a job or changed their living location because of Iwama? A very powerful influence. And this is just the people here in this room today. Now multiply that many times and you can maybe get a little bit of an idea of the impact of Morihiro Saito Sensei on Aikido. My association with him actually began back in 1969. I made a trip to Tokyo and spent 10 weeks studying Aikido there. And he, if you're not familiar with Aikido history, you may be surprised to learn that Saito Sensei taught for many years at the Aikikai Home Dojo in Tokyo, Shinjuku, from about 1960, 61 till 1969. And when I first saw him there, he was teaching these Sunday morning classes. And he had the largest number of attendees consistently of anyone at the dojo. I took some 8mm film there, and many of you have been to the Hombu Dojo too, I would imagine, so you know it's about maybe, the mat is probably maybe 2/5 the size of this blue mat here, would be my guess. And so when I panned across the mat, and there must have been 60 or 65 people in that small space. But what he would do is he would teach the kind of Aikido you saw here today, and then he would devote the last, I think, 15 or 20 minutes of the classes teaching the Aikiken and the Aikijo. And he was the only one at Hombu Dojo to be teaching weapons at that point in time. Well, I was very impressed with Saito Sensei, but I was also impressed with other teachers as well. So I didn't really have any idea at that time to study with Saito Sensei in a teacher-student relationship. So one thing I was able to do is, many of you know Bill Witt Sensei from California. Well, he was training at the Hombu at that time, and he invited me to go out to Iwama to see Saito Sensei, and that was his first trip out there, and I went with him. So I was at the beginning, even though I didn't follow through at that stage, but I know the first visit to Iwama. So that was the initial experience with Saito Sensei. Then I ended up
Aiki no Tanden, Aiki training. Aiki will be learned naturally as a product of training. I will explain the specifics orally. 18. When an opponent grabs your hand. 19. When an opponent grabs both your hands. 20. When an opponent attacks with a strike. 21. Yokomen training. Uke. Execute a Yokomenuchi strike with your right hand. Shite. Step diagonally forward with your left foot while deflecting your opponent's right hand with your left tegatana. Then strike his head with your right tegatana. Training against rear attacks. 22. Uke. Grab your opponent's rear collar with your right hand and pull it backward. Shite. The moment your opponent pulls your back collar, pivot to the left on your right foot while stepping diagonally back and to his right. Then strike his head with your left hand and the pit of his stomach with your right hand in order to bring him down.
San.
23. Uke. Proceed as described in technique number 22. Shite. Draw your right foot diagonally back and to the right while striking your opponent's head with your left tegatana. Draw out another opponent's attack with your right hand. Uke. Deflect your opponent's left hand with your left hand. Shite. Take a large step backward with your left foot and bend your body fully forward while shifting diagonally to the rear and right of your opponent. Apply a lock on his right arm with your right arm while striking his back with your left hand to bring him down.
Young.
24. Uke. Grab your opponent's rear collar with your right hand and push him forward. Shite. The moment your opponent attempts to grab your rear collar, step forward with your right foot and, using it as a pivot, turn to the left while striking your opponent's head with your left tegatana to bring him down. 25. Uke. Proceed as described in the previous technique. Shite. The moment your opponent attempts to grab your rear collar, turn to your right onto your right foot while entering diagonally to the right rear of your opponent. Then strike down his right hand with your right tegatana. Next, step in with your right foot to his rear while striking his head with your right hand to bring him down. Twenty-six. Uke. Grab your opponent's two hands from behind with your hands. Shite. Step back with your left foot while raising up both your hands. Next, step backward with your right foot and at the same time lower both your hands to throw your opponent forward.
Shoumen.
27. Shite. Lead your opponent's attack with your ki. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Immediately after your opponent moves to strike you, turn your body and enter deeply to his right side while striking his wrist with your left tegatana. Pay attention to your back. Execute an atemi to his head with your right fist and bring him down to your left as described in technique number 8. Grab the sword by placing your right little and ring fingers on the hilt. Next, move to the left, passing over his head, and pin him face downward. Take the sword away from your opponent with both hands and cut his neck. Shite. Proceed as in technique number 25. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Enter in irimi while striking his side. Next, bring him down as described in technique number 7. Shite. Stand with your right foot forward and draw out your opponent's attack with your ki as described above. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Enter in irimi to your opponent's left while executing a strike to the pit of his stomach. Grab the hilt of the sword and strike his head with your right tegatana. Train your ki while cultivating sharp eyes. Shite. Lead the opponent's attack with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's head from the jodan or upper position. Shite. The moment your opponent comes to strike you, turn either to the right or left. You must practice until you become able to move calmly when exposed to the danger of dying by the sword. Explanation. There is an opening at the moment your opponent comes to strike you. I find out the enemy's opening with the same spirit as if I were drawing a sword. A piece of iron is merely a physical thing, but still has weaknesses. However, it becomes steel or a sword through the refining process. The swordsmith Masamune's fine, flawless blades were the product of countless hours of practice. The same concept applies to your training. Practice without creating any openings for your opponent. If he cuts you, make sure to cut him, and if he thrusts you, thrust him. If you cultivate this spirit, you will become a true martial artist. Yokomen Do. 31. Kuden oral teaching. Tanken. 32. The moment your opponent thrusts you with a knife or threatens you with a gun, apply technique number 7. (33) Apply technique number 8. (34) Uke. Stab at your opponent's head with a knife. Shite. The moment your opponent comes to stab you, enter an irimi and grab his right forearm from below with your right hand and apply Dai Ippo. Kote. 35. Shite. Draw out his kote or wrist with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's wrist. Shite. Move your body to the left and cut his wrist. 36. Shite. Lead your opponent's right hand with your ki. Uke. Strike his head with your sword. Shite. Move your body and enter to the right while striking his head. 37. Shite. Lead your opponent's attack to your head with your ki. Uke. Strike your opponent's head. Shite. Enter an irimi while striking his head. I will explain the theory of cutting an opponent while avoiding being cut by his sword. Tsuki 38. Shite. Proceed as described above. Uke. Execute a strike to your opponent's head. Shite. Enter an irimi and thrust your opponent's chest with your sword with the blade upward. Then immediately strike his head and execute a second thrust. (39) Shite. Assume a right irimi stance with an aiki posture and lead your opponent's attack. Uke. Execute a chokuzuki or direct thrust. Shite. Enter an irimi and strike down his left forearm with your right tegatana. Next, grab his rear collar with your right hand and strike his head with your left tegatana. 40. Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. As described above, after attacking your opponent, grab his juken or bayonet with both hands and step in with your right foot to throw him. (41) Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. After entering an irimi as described in technique number 37, grab his bayonet from below with your left hand and draw your left foot back while applying an elbow lock with your right forearm. (42) Shite. Assume a left irimi stance with an aiki posture to face your opponent. Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. Enter an irimi and strike your opponent's head with your left tegatana while striking his left forearm with your right tegatana. Then grab his bayonet with both hands and step in with your right foot to bring him down. 43. You and your opponent face each other holding bayonets. Shite. Read your opponent's attack with your ki. Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. The moment your opponent comes to thrust you, turn and enter an irimi to the left and thrust your opponent. The attack against a spear is almost identical to that using the bayonet. 44. Practice as described for throwing practice. Uke. Grab both your opponent's hands with your hands. Shite. Put power into the fingertips of both hands as you would for a throwing practice. Step diagonally forward and to the right with your left foot while raising both hands all the way up. Then, turn to the right while pivoting on your left foot and lower both your hands to support Uke's body. Then move back to the opposite side to return to the original position and repeat.
(45)
45. Both you and your opponent sit opposite each other in seiza. Uke. Grab both your opponent's hands with your hands. Shite. Turn your palms inward, putting power into your fingertips. Concentrate your mind and push your opponent as if swinging up a sword, thus raising both his forearms. Advance forward with your right knee to assume a handachi position and bring your opponent down to your left. After downing your opponent, open both palms slightly to the sides. Then push your right hand towards Uke's left shoulder and your left hand down and forward to your left. You must not draw your hands towards you. 46. Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. Proceed in almost the same manner as the previous technique, but turn both palms outward, extending them diagonally forward to the left in order to bring down your opponent. 47. Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. Raise your right hand while twisting it towards Uke's left shoulder and raise your left hand to the inside. Push your opponent forward and down to the left to bring him down. 48. Uke. Proceed as described above. Shite. Bring the opponent down to the right or left as if scooping something up with both hands. 49. I will teach this orally. Sei no undo. 50. Shite. Grab Uke's hands with your hands. Uke. Extend your right hand diagonally forward and to the left. Turn your body so that your back faces Uke's and lift him onto your back. Shite. Let go of Uke's hands as he slides down your back slowly. This is really a wonderful book. These techniques represent the founder's art as of 1938, before World War II. It is said that Aikido was perfected after the war, and I think that is certainly the case, because there's a great difference between these and the techniques of the founder in his later years. Why did the founder make changes to the techniques of Budo later in his life? If we compare the differences in techniques, I think the founder's reasons will become clear. I can't go into this subject now, but if I have an opportunity in the future, I would like to clearly show the pre-war techniques of Budo and compare them with his later techniques to explain why it was the founder made these various changes.
後日機会があれば
I hope I will have such an opportunity.
説明してみたいと思います。
Nippon to have such an honored guest to be here today. He's a good friend of Nippon for many, many years. And he's the editor of Aikido Journal. Mr. Family Friend, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you everyone for having me. You've seen now about 7.5 hours of Iwama Aikido, some of the top, highest level of Aikido I think in the world. And for those of you who are new to Aikido, you may wonder where all this came from and how it compares with other systems of Aikido. Well, part of what I'll talk about today will cover precisely that topic. And you'll get a lot to, you'll find out a great deal about this gentleman here, the father of Morihiro Sensei.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
I have to turn the page. Okay. I would like to start out by illustrating a very important point. How many people among you here today have been to Iwama? Just raise your hand. How many people have attended a seminar by Saito Sensei? Either here. Let me ask you this one. How many people have changed a job or changed their living location because of Iwama? A very powerful influence. And this is just the people here in this room today. Now multiply that many times and you can maybe get a little bit of an idea of the impact of Morihiro Saito Sensei on Aikido. My association with him actually began back in 1969. I made a trip to Tokyo and spent 10 weeks studying Aikido there. And he, if you're not familiar with Aikido history, you may be surprised to learn that Saito Sensei taught for many years at the Aikikai Home Dojo in Tokyo, Shinjuku, from about 1960, 61 till 1969. And when I first saw him there, he was teaching these Sunday morning classes. And he had the largest number of attendees consistently of anyone at the dojo. I took some 8mm film there, and many of you have been to the Hombu Dojo too, I would imagine, so you know it's about maybe, the mat is probably maybe 2/5 the size of this blue mat here, would be my guess. And so when I panned across the mat, and there must have been 60 or 65 people in that small space. But what he would do is he would teach the kind of Aikido you saw here today, and then he would devote the last, I think, 15 or 20 minutes of the classes teaching the Aikiken and the Aikijo. And he was the only one at Hombu Dojo to be teaching weapons at that point in time. Well, I was very impressed with Saito Sensei, but I was also impressed with other teachers as well. So I didn't really have any idea at that time to study with Saito Sensei in a teacher-student relationship. So one thing I was able to do is, many of you know Bill Witt Sensei from California? Well, he was training at the Hombu at that time, and he invited me to go out to Iwama to see Saito Sensei, and that was his first trip out there, and I went with him. So I was at the beginning, even though I didn't follow through at that stage, but I know the first visit to Iwama. So that was the initial experience with Saito Sensei. Then I ended up in the military, and I lived in Monterey for several years and had association with several people in this room. Is Pat around? Pat Hendricks is one of them. The next time that I saw Saito Sensei, interestingly enough, was in California in 1974. And again, I think there's a few people in this room who were present and participated in the seminar given by Saito Sensei in Northern California in 1974 in October. And it was a real eye-opener for many people in the United States who were not familiar with Saito Sensei, which was mostly everyone. To see the Aikido the way it's presented here too, in this encyclopedic, logical method where the techniques all are in order, they flow together, there's a logical progression from one to another. It's very revealing and with also very clear explanations. And Saito Sensei made a very big impact in the Northern California, the Bay Area at that time. And I can remember taking a lot of films there and participating in the training as well. But as I taught you today, I'm going to relate various episodes along the way. And one particular episode, which I have on film, but I'll try to describe it with you. Saito Sensei was in the old San Francisco Aikikai on Turk Street. And he had everybody come in. There was a couple of hundred people in the school there. So he had everybody come in close. So it was tight quarters. But he was, I think it was a Kokyunage technique. Anyway, he had David Alexander, probably some of you know him. And he took David, threw him, a Kokyunage, and saw that he was going to crash into the crowd. So he lifts out one hand, catches him, brings him back in. And everybody was standing there like this with their eyes open, and they applauded him at the end. It was just, I mean, to have the presence of mind and the physical strength to hold a man out with one hand that way was really a remarkable thing. At some point I'll probably be able to edit that film and you can see it for yourselves. Just a really remarkable thing. The next really serious interaction I had with Saito Sensei is when I moved to Japan in 1977, in August. Let me tell you a little bit about my reasoning and why I wanted to go to Iwama. I had been to various parts of Japan. I had spent a fair amount of time in Tokyo, and I saw quite a few Japanese teachers who visited the United States in the early 70s, late 60s and early 70s. And I think it was probably the 1974 seminar in San Francisco and Stanford that made me really realize the importance of Iwama Aikido. And also, you may recall at that time, Saito Sensei had begun publishing a series of 5 volumes called Traditional Aikido. And we were eagerly awaiting each volume, and none of us knew anything really about weapons at that point, so we would go out and practice trying to follow the technical sequences. We were pretty bad at first and whetted our appetites for it. So when I went to Japan, I had to decide where I was going to alight and who I was going to study with, basically. And there are several people whose Aikido I like, but I would never have chosen to go to Iwama as my favorite place to live in Japan. But Saito Sensei was there, so that was a mandate. But those of you who live there, and I know there are many who know that it's a tough place. It's sort of like being in the military. But since I had done 3 years, I wasn't eager to do much more. So I ended up being a Soto Deshi, living outside the dojo and doing work and training there. But I spent 5 years at the Iwama Dojo at that time. And during that period, there was a number of very interesting episodes. The first time I traveled with Saito Sensei abroad, when he went on his teaching tours, was in 1979. We went to the East Coast to the USAF summer camp, sponsored by Yamada Sensei, Kanai Sensei, and that group of people. And then we also visited California and Canada on that trip. And that was really a wonderful experience for me because I was able to spend a long period of time with him on a one-to-one basis, especially during all the travels. And I began to know the man on a much more personal basis. There was a bit of a relaxation between the student-teacher relationship simply because of all the time together in travel. The next episode that I can recall takes us back to Japan. It was about 1981. See, I started Aikido with Saito Sensei at a little older age than many of you folks. I was about, I think, 33 at that point. And I had also begun my research into Aikido history. And I must say, and anybody who knows me from that period will surely agree, that I was a bit cheeky at that point in time. And in the sense that I liked Saito Sensei's Aikido very much. However, I didn't think it was completely faithful to the Aikido of O-sensei. And I succeeded in my broken Japanese at that stage in verbalizing that to Saito Sensei, very much to his amusement. And I said, Sensei, I have quite a few O-sensei films, and O-sensei's techniques didn't look like that. When O-sensei was doing the demonstrations, he was not teaching or showing the way he would in Iwama. This is the way he taught. The way I'm teaching you now in Iwama is the way he taught that. I said, yes, Sensei, I understand. I said, your Aikido is wonderful, but I still have some doubts about that point. So he just kind of gave up on me. So what happened was that around 1981, I did an interview with an old gentleman, a pre-war student of O-sensei named Akazawa Zenzaburo, who actually lived in Iwama. And during the course of the interview, he pulls out this little booklet from 1938 called Budo, martial arts. It's just a generic name. And in it, it's the only technical manual featuring photographs of O-sensei. I don't think he actually wrote the text, but he posed for all the photographs of it. And in that book, see, Shihonage, this way, Irinage this way, and most of the key points of the Iwama techniques are right there in the photos. Oh my God. Now I have proof that what he's saying is accurate. So Akazawa Sensei was kind enough to lend me his original copy of the 1938 manual, and I literally ran to Saito Sensei's house and, Sensei, have you ever seen this book before? Pulls out his glasses and puts them on. He goes, oh, very interesting. I said, Sensei, there's position exactly like Iwama Aikido. Of course there are. I told you 1,000 times. I said, I apologize, Sensei. I should have believed you. Anyway, again, that amused him very much. That fortunately, we found documentary evidence where the link between the Aikido of O-sensei from the late 1930s through the, let's say, the 1950s was very close to the Iwama Aikido. Now, this is not to say that Saito Sensei didn't add a lot of his own genius and thinking to the Aikido of Iwama. O-sensei would show these techniques, but Saito Sensei would explain them in a way that is easy to grasp for virtually anyone. And that's why you see so many strong, centered students who've trained in the Iwama style and who have really a good handle on this vast technical repertoire. Most of the Aikido that has been disseminated in the post-war Japan is really the product of some of the main students of O-sensei more than O-sensei. Because remember, for all intents and purposes, when O-sensei went to Iwama in 1942, he was already, let's see, 1942, he was 59 years old. So he was sort of like going into retirement there. And by the time the war ended, the practice of, at least the formal practice of martial arts was prohibited by the GHQ. But he was quietly ensconced in Iwama, training very intensively, farming, meditating. So Saito Sensei started as a young man in 1946, as an 18-year-old, and really his position there, the fact that he was able to continue, the fact that he was able to be so close to O-sensei is partially owing to his talent and enthusiasm, but also it's a lot of good luck. Because if he had employment like most of the other people in the village, who were farmers for the most part, he would never have been able to continue the way he did. But he worked for the Japan National Railroad at that time, and he had a 24-hour on, 24-hour off shift. So he was able to spend like 24-hour periods with O-sensei several times a week, and this went on for years and years and years. Saito sensei ended up, I think, spending 30 years on the railroad. So, well, you can read about it in some of the books about his background there, but he was in a unique position. He was able to help out O-sensei on a private basis, not just within a dojo context. And that's why he was able to get a great amount of very intense instruction from O-sensei, even on a one-to-one basis. And this is how the techniques that came to comprise the Aiki Ken and Aiki Jo were developed during that period. Saito sensei served as the partner for O-sensei, went through many different sequences, and later he formalized it. So Saito sensei has indeed preserved a great amount, the majority of O-sensei's Aikido from that period, especially post-war period. But also he contributed greatly by producing an organized technical curriculum that was teachable and easily understood, and which has been disseminated all over the world. And it's become one of the major technical trends in Aikido, and it's, I think, among the highest technical standards that you'll find. I used to kid Saito sensei. Saito sensei, you know that he was a very strong, heavy person. He just had a junior high school education, especially when he was excited, which was often spoke in a thick Ibaraki accent. So you would never think of him, as any kind of an academic, but I used to say, Sensei, if you had been born in Tokyo to a wealthy family, I'm sure you would have ended up being a Hakase or PhD, because he was so logical in the way that he organized his technical curriculum. And he could just go, and we saw Hitohiro sensei teaching, and he probably showed at least 20 variations from each grad. And in a lot of places they would be hard pressed to come up with that type of technical depth and to show the interrelationships between them. Shortly after Saito sensei's death last year, I wrote a memorial article. You can read it online if you like. But what I tried to do is, Saito sensei was frustrated in a lot of senses by the way Aikido was developing. He saw that people were taking it off into a different direction compared to what O-sensei was doing. And he always felt that his role, being in Iwama, having his house on Ueshiba property or adjacent to Ueshiba property, his role as the dojo-cho, the head instructor of the Iwama dojo, his role as the guardian of the Aiki shrine, he felt himself in a position of needing to do his best to preserve the Aikido and the environment of Iwama the way O-sensei created it. So he was not really the type of person, given his viewpoint, who would attempt to go out and create new forms of Aikido or cross-train and do other things. His was a conservative viewpoint, that of preserving what he learned from the master. So when he saw, if he would go to, let's say, a large demonstration or traveling abroad, he would see Aikido and he would get frustrated. And I kind of began to recall back, and I sort of paraphrased the kinds of things that he would say, usually in a very excited voice. He'd say, look, those people criticize Iwama Aikido without ever having experienced it directly. They say all we do is the basics. I'd like to see them perform a technique on all these different levels. Do they really expect to learn effective techniques while skipping the basics? Do they attempt to start practicing Kino Nagare techniques right from the beginning? This is a big mistake. And I had to agree with him. So he stressed basics all the time, but if you were lucky enough to study with him at, let's say, maybe 20, 25 years ago, he was still moving very well. And he would often teach Kino Nagare. And he would start, of course, from basics, and then he would take it up to the next level. And sometimes he would show 3, 4, 5 levels, and finally at the very end, his movement was just kind of a suggestion of a technique, and it would be a no-hands throw. And I know that a lot of people never saw that, but that was within him, and he was certainly capable of doing that. But he chose to emphasize the basics because I think he found them lacking in the Aikido world. I began traveling abroad with Sensei quite a bit from the years 1985 to 1989. I think we must have been abroad together, I don't know, 12 or 15 times. I remember one time we went out for a whole month. It was a long, long trip. But again, I spent hundreds of hours just sitting on airplanes with him, and he was sleeping some of the time, but he was talking a lot of the time too. And I would quiz him about O-sensei and his training there, and I think I heard what he had to say about that period of time many times, and a lot of it is very strongly engraved in my mind. But the trips to, during that period, I think were very important. He traveled to Italy on several occasions, and a little bit to France. We went to England, we went to Scandinavia, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, visited quite a few different countries. In Italy, he has a very close student, a fellow named Paolo Corradini, who's a dentist, and his interaction with Saito Sensei was very important, not just because he was a devoted student, but because he created opportunities for Saito Sensei to be filmed in depth. So we did a whole series of videotapes in Italy. Usually we do 1 or 2 whenever we went to that country. And it was literally every year for that 5-year period, and I think 1 year we even went twice. But it was during that time that he posed for the techniques. I mentioned the Budo manual, 1938 technical manual of O-sensei. I coerced him, and I mean coerced him because he did not want to do it. There are 50 techniques in the manual. The first task was to list up all the techniques and give them names. Well, only a few of them had names, and usually it was just the attack or just the throw. So in order to make some kind of a formal presentation, we had to give names to all 50 techniques. So yeah, I would sit down with Saito Sensei, and okay, Sensei, what would you call this technique? Write down the name. And then, what would you call this technique? Oh, I don't know, it's a Koki market. Okay, we'll skip it for now. We went down there, down the list, and finally we got about 45 of them. I said, Sensei, we've got to come up with some kind of nomenclature so that we can keep this organized. And I don't want to do it. O-sensei didn't care about the names. I don't care about the names. You call it whatever you want. So, fortunately, we had a Japanese with us, so we came up with some suggestions, and finally he okayed the suggestions we came up with. So we had a list of the 50 techniques, and the next thing was to get him into the gymnasium. We set up a display with flowers in the background, and the idea was that he would sit in the chair reading the manual, the technical manual. So he would put on his glasses, read the manual, and sometimes he would goof up and we'd have to go back and reshoot it. And then he would, after we did the reading, which took a couple of hours, then he went through and performed all of the techniques, 2 times that we filmed it. And we didn't do anything with them really for years and years and years. But then later when we began to do the Takimusu Aikido series, the technical series, I suggested to Sensei that as one of the projects that we kind of do a special volume which was based on that old technical manual. This is a very important source of techniques. Again, as I mentioned, it's the only manual where O-sensei himself posed for photographs. And also, it's the most convincing historical document we have to show that what Saito Sensei was doing was very closely related to what O-sensei was doing in Iwama. I mentioned Italy and Europe in general, but Italy, we had quite a few adventures there, and I'll share a couple of them with you. Saito Sensei, when I first met him, had very bad teeth. He was seriously in need of dental work. Unfortunately, Paolo Corradini was a dentist. So Paolo suggested to me, he said, Stanley, if you want, on this next trip, why don't you have Saito Sensei come a few days earlier and I'll do his complete teeth. I mean, he had major dental work. So anyway, Saito Sensei went there, and Paolo was a nervous wreck. He says, what if I screw it up? What if I hurt him or something? Or when they're making the taps and the bridges, what if the guy screws up? What will I do? He was a complete nervous wreck. But anyway, I think he went through, it was like 2 solid days of dental work. It was very tiring. But finally, Saito Sensei had his new teeth. And he was smiling with his nice white, perfectly aligned teeth. And I tend to be a mild-mannered person, but I have a devious side to me. This was my opportunity to try to get Saito Sensei to cut down on his drinking, which is something I always wanted to do. So on these trips at that point in time, Tomita Takeji Sensei from Sweden would usually join us. So he was there too. So I got together with Tomita-san and Paolo, and we conspired to try to get Saito Sensei to cut down his drinking. Well, here was the plan. The plan was to have Paolo, after he completed the dental work, sit down as a medical doctor and lecture Saito Sensei on how he should be taking very good care of his teeth, and how drinking too much is not good for your gums, etc., and so forth. So Saito Sensei's sitting in the chair there, and Paolo's lecturing in Italian, and I'm translating in Japanese, and Tomita-san, who knows what's going on, is sitting there going, I thought he was going to break out into laughter. Saito Sensei had his mouth open half the time. So anyway, Saito Sensei went about 4 or 5 days without drinking. And it was tough. It was very tough. But anyway, things went back to normal eventually, and I never again said anything about that. I just withdrew. That was my one serious attempt to change his lifestyle. But I figured, he was a grown man and he knew what he wanted to do. And within that culture, that's a very common sort of thing. It was quite a humorous episode. As I said, I traveled with Saito Sensei on many occasions, and my role sort of was that of what they call in Japanese kaban mochi, bag carrier. So I, of course, went along to translate mainly. But as you know, I've been involved with the Aikido News and Aikido Journal, and usually I would carry along books and magazines and what have you, videotapes, that sort of thing. So on that 1 month long trip that I mentioned, we did film shows in like, I think about 10 locations. So I had a 16mm projector. Maybe you're a little older would know what they're like. I had one of those video projectors, 16-meter reel films, videotapes, books and magazines. So when we get to our destination, I think it was in Rome, they had to come off the plane. Now I'm supposed to be carrying Sensei's luggage, but I brought about 3 times more luggage than him, so he ends up helping me carry my luggage off the plane. So I'm probably one of the only kaban mochi who ended up having the teacher carry his bags. That was another famous story. Another one is that any of you who have ever been in a situation where you have to do interpreting, it's a tough job, especially at mealtime. And he always would accuse me of being the slowest eater in the world. So everybody for a while, was very patient when I would sit there trying to eat and interpret it. Tell Sensei this. Sensei, do the translation. Try to go back and identify it. Sensei, you tell them this. Oh, okay. So I would go, and in Italy they serve meals in courses. So they were all done, and they were ready for dessert, and I hadn't finished the first course yet. So Sensei said, okay, everybody be quiet, let Planet finish his meal. So I would try to eat very quickly, which is hard for me. So finally I just abandoned that, and I would go down about a half hour early to eat, And when it came time for meal time, I would just interpret and nothing else. That seemed to work out okay. To everyone's satisfaction. Saito Sensei was a man of very firm convictions, and he was not afraid to speak his mind. And he was not afraid in private, certainly, and he was not afraid to speak his mind in public. So I try to encourage him not to be too publicly critical of certain approaches to Aikido. I need him to elaborate, I'm sure. But there was one occasion, I think this was in Italy too, where there was maybe 150 people on the mat, and he was going on. I think he saw a student do something completely wrong, and he went into a tirade on, why you shouldn't do it that way, and he criticized the major style of Aikido that does it the wrong way, and he just went on and on and on. And I'm having to interpret this, and he's going on, and he looks at me, and my translations are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And he's getting madder and madder and madder. And finally, he really lets out a strong criticism. I'm over there like this. Aren't you going to translate that? And he says, he's mad at me. He won't even translate. He doesn't want me to criticize these people. So I was the interpreter who wouldn't interpret to them. Another famous episode is let's see, I think in France we were in Lyon and Paris, and naturally when you invite a teacher, you try to make some time for them to do sightseeing. Well, the host for that particular seminar didn't know that Saito Sensei cared very little for tourism. He was not a tourist. So anyway, they took us to the Eiffel Tower. I'd never been there before. I thought, this is great. I'll be able to take a couple of pictures and we'll walk around for a little while. So we arrived there. Sensei looks up to the top, and it's really big, isn't it? Says, I'm going to take a couple of pictures. Okay, I've seen it now, I'm ready to go. We were there 5 minutes. So that was the extent of his tourism. He wanted to go from there. He was much more interested in shopping. He would always buy bags and leather goods. He really liked that. So I still have yet to have a good look at the Eiffel Tower. I hope someday to go by myself, or I'll be able to spend a little longer. Another very interesting thing, very important thing I think historically that happened during that period is we being Nike News, sponsored a series of demonstrations in Tokyo starting 1985 through 1988. We called them the friendship demonstrations. And in the first demonstration, we had 6 very well-known teachers, Saito Sensei among them. And he was very good about cooperating with us. And we had 900 people attend that first demonstration, even though it was raining that day and there was some activity afoot to, let's say, not exactly support what we were doing, but he was very understanding about that. But anyway, he gave rather long, like say 20 to 30-minute technical demonstrations for the 4 years in a row. And of course, we have them preserved in video. So they're very good examples of his Aikido, and he's very genki, as we say, full of energy, very spirited in his demonstrations. So he was the only teacher, as my personal teacher, he was the one I asked to be in every demonstration. All the other teachers, we had them come just once. The Saito Sensei came 4 times. And I think that those visual documents are really among the most important for capturing Saito Sensei when he was really at his peak. Around 1992 or thereabouts, we had the idea of doing a technical series with Saito Sensei. Now, as you probably know, he did the 5-volume series in the early to mid-1970s. But by that point in time, they were mostly out of print and very hard to get. And also, some of the reprintings, they had cut corners, and some of the photographs were very small and they didn't have good contrast. They're hard to read. And also, I wanted to do something in a little bit more depth. So we talked Saito Sensei into starting a technical series. And fortunately, we were able to complete 6 volumes. But it was interesting how we did them. We would rent a facility, like a sports, well, really like a cultural center, and we would have like a judo dojo. And we would put the camera on a tripod and then go through the technical series. And of course, we were always running out of film, and we'd have to have him wait to rewind. But he participated like a trooper, and we did literally hundreds and hundreds of technical shots on probably, I would imagine we did 4 or 5 technical sequences over the years. But what he would then do is we would develop the photographs, put them in sequence, and put them like in notebooks and take them to him up in Iwama. And then Saito Sensei, he would go in O-Sensei's room usually, and he would put on his glasses and look at the technique, and then he would close his eyes and then start moving his hands. He was going through in his mind the whole sequence and describing it completely. So then we would take the tape recordings of him explaining the techniques, transcribe them, and send him the text, and then he would go ahead and make amendments to that. But that's how the books were written, as it were. He spoke the techniques just like he would in class, but we had to put in more detail, and we were, after every technique, would say, did O-Sensei have a kuden for that one? And I said, yeah, and then he would give us the kuden, the secret oral teaching for the technique. So we have many of those preserved in the books as well. Those of you who knew Saito Sensei probably knew he had a terrific sense of humor. And he would set you up for a joke and then slip in that joke, and it was really funny. I have one that I really remember. I cannot for the life of me recall what the occasion was, but I took a lunch that my wife had prepared for me to Iwama. Probably we were working on a book, I would imagine, something like that. It was normal I didn't take my lunch there. But I was very proud because I had learned a colloquial Japanese expression, and the expression was "aisai bento," which means literally loving wife lunch. In other words, my loving wife prepared my lunch for me. The sensei says, "What are you eating?" I said, Sensei, it's aisai bento. You mean chosai bento, which means strong wife lunch. And I got rather red. It was quite embarrassing, but it was a terrific joke. But that was typical of his very sharp wit. And he could make anybody laugh, especially like after training, if he'd been drinking. I mean, he was the life of the party. And he was always in a good mood, at least on those occasions. Any of you who visited the tables over there will have seen a very nice portrait of Saito Sensei. Let me tell you a little bit about that. In 1992, he was awarded the 9th Dan, and they had a big party at a hotel in Iwama. And then in 1996, the students got together and created a large party for him that was attended by Doshu and Morihiro Sensei, the president of Doshu, and lots of dignitaries. And they held that at the same hotel. And Sensei got all dressed up in his kimono, formal kimono. And they had a stretch limousine waiting for him to take him from the dojo to the place, which is about 3 minutes away. But anyway, I kept hoping they would invite me to sit in there, but they didn't. But since he was all dressed up, and so was his wife, I said, this is my chance. So I had along with me not just a 35mm camera, there was a Mamiya medium format, so the negative is about 3 times larger, about that big. I said, Sensei, please can I get a couple of quick photos of you in front of the Aiki shrine? And he was, okay, but you have to be quick, I've got to get over there. Okay, Sensei, just take me a minute. So we went out there, and I took maybe 2 or 3 shots of Sensei and his wife, and then a shot of Sensei from each angle. And the photo over there was taken on that occasion in 1996, with a stretch limousine in the background, ready to whisk them over to the hotel for the ceremony. And there were, there must have been at least 200 people there. several teachers from Hombu and Doshu and Morihiro Sensei. And Isoyama Sensei, you may know of, was the person elected to give the toast. So he gave a speech, and in the speech he referred to Saito Sensei as the Gendai Miyamoto Musashi, or the present modern day Miyamoto Musashi. And Sensei, I think, made a strange look, but anyway, then everybody had to kanpai. And he was Gendai Miyamoto Musashi for a day. Denver has been a very important place for Iwama. Kaku Sensei and the Nippokan Dojo have hosted him, I think, was it 4 occasions, Emily? 4 occasions. And he used to always very much like to come here. Homa Sensei, while maintaining his independence organizationally and his independent mind and all of his activities, always showed the deepest respect for Saito Sensei, and he really respected Homa Sensei more and more with each year as they would have this interaction. And he also, he always loved very much to come back here. And I know many of you have participated in several of the seminars, and I think some of the larger ones had like 350 people on this very mat. It was very crowded, but you know, they were very important because they ended up being some of his last seminars as well. So Saito Sensei and Iwama and now Tohito Sensei are, and all of us are really indebted to the Denver group here, and Kakuhoma Sensei for all their wonderful support and creating these beautifully well-organized seminars, and what you're seeing is just fantastic technical displays. I'm sure you'll have, even if you're not doing Iwama Aikido, you'll have a lot of technical input to take back and digest in your own dojos. The last time that I saw Saito Sensei when he was still active was in October of 2001, and we did something very interesting. I had, along about the mid-90s, I started having some contact with Tohei Koichi Sensei. And Tohei Koichi Sensei was a senpai, a senior of Saito Sensei in Iwama when he first began training. And even though Tohei Sensei left the Aikikai in 1974 on less than friendly terms, Saito Sensei would often talk about Tohei Sensei and how much he respected him. And when I started being able to see Tohei Sensei on several occasions, I once proposed to him, telling him that Saito Sensei very much respected that they get together. And Tohei Sensei thought about it and says, Brandon, I'm not ready to do this. You know, there's so many memories I have of those days, and no thank you. But in 2001, when I came to Japan, Tohito Sensei called the office. He said, why don't you have Pranan contact Tohei Sensei to see if he'll meet my father. So I really didn't hold out much hope. So we called the Key Society Hombu in Shinjuku and talked to the secretary and expressed the idea. And the woman said, all right, well, Tohei Sensei's not here now. He's in Tochigi Prefecture, his native place. But we'll ask him. And lo and behold, a day later, we got the approval that Tohei Sensei would meet Saito Sensei. And he had not seen him for over 30 years. So I went up to Iwama on the train, and about noon, Tohito Sensei drove Saito Sensei, myself, and a couple of Uchideshi over to Tohei Sensei's home, which I had never seen really. And we spent about a little over an hour together, reminiscing about the old days. And we took a couple of photographs, which are up on our website, so you can see that. But I was just absolutely delighted that that dream was realized and that he was able to see Tohei Sensei after so many years, and they were able to have some good communication. That was really the last time I saw him well, he was not in good health, but he was still active at that point. And then February was the last time that I visited Iwama while Saito Sensei was still alive. and he was bedridden at that point. And I knew this was quite likely the last time, so there's a couple of subjects about which Saito Sensei was very proud and they were very important to him. And I had heard him mention them many times, like on an airplane or on a train or whatever, but for some reason it had never really come up in an interview context, so I didn't have it on tape. So I asked him two questions. And the first one was, Sensei, tell me again about the circumstances where O-Sensei gave you that piece of land, the Ueshiba property, to build your house. And he described how he had helped O-Sensei settle a land dispute back in the, well, it was early 50s. And then O-Sensei, out of gratitude, it wasn't just gratitude, he wanted Saito Sensei and his wife there on the property to help him and his wife too. But anyway, that story is recorded. I'll transcribe it at some point and we'll publish it. But that was one thing. And the second thing was, here's another very interesting story that nobody knows about. Toward the end of Shioda Sensei's life, I think he probably knew that he didn't have too much longer. The Yoshinkan called him, I think they met someplace in Tokyo, and they had a big wig of a big company, Shioda Sensei, Inoue Sensei, and this is going to surprise you, they proposed that when Shioda Sensei passed away, that Saito Sensei become the head, the kancho of Yoshinkan Aikido. It was very, very interesting. And very flattering for Saito Sensei, I might add. But he explained that his role was to be in Iwama, to watch over O-Sensei's dojo, watch over the Aiki shrine, and to protect O-Sensei's legacy. And he did that to the very end. And I was just very privileged to have had as much contact as I did with him over the years. And we were able to really accomplish a lot, especially in documenting what he was doing and what O-Sensei was doing. And that interaction with him was certainly among the real highlights of my life. And it's a pleasure to share that with you. I think in the time we have remaining here, if you have any questions about Saito Sensei or Iwama, if I don't know it, I can probably get an answer, but I probably know the answer. So I'd like to throw it open if you have anything you'd like to ask about.
Question.
Yes, please.
Last year, there was a chance that Isayama Sensei could have been in the Aiki Expo, and I was wondering what style he is considered. He's a Iwama style.
I won't answer at length, but basically Isayama Sensei started Aikido at age 12. He was born in Iwama. And he was in the Iwama dojo, I think, until about the age of maybe 19 or so, and then he went into the Air Force. Air Self-Defense Force, and he had a career there. So his early training in Aikido was Iwama training, and then the remainder of his career he was pretty much on his own teaching on military bases, and also he had a group in Fujishido for several years as well too. So he has the Iwama basics, but then again a lot of his style is somewhat different. And he evolved, I think, on his own because he was transferred to different locations and he would teach it on a military basis. So that's the difference there, really, in the style. Some similarities, but many differences also. Yes? The question that Keiko asked is that she has heard that there are plans afoot to, perhaps in a couple of years' time, to convert the Iwama dojo into like a little small museum. This apparently is the wish of Hombu Dojo. I don't know if there's any specific time frame for that to happen, but Hitohiro Sensei has that in his mind. And of course, as you know, the Saito Sensei built what he called the Shin Dojo on his property above the Yamamiko, and then Hitohiro Sensei at his home, which is about maybe a a kilometer or so away from dojo, has a dojo of his own. So he's actually got 2 dojos besides the old Iwama dojo. It would be a shame, the building is old, it was built during the war, but it's such a historic place. But anyway, that's Ueshiba property, and basically they decide what's going to happen. So I don't know if anybody knows about a specific time. But again, in the late 80s, 1988, 89, they said that they were going to sell the dojo and that the dojo would be torn down and Osensei's home would be torn down, but it never happened. So it's hard to say what's going to happen, but that's what the talk is. Yes?
Along the same lines, what do you think the relationship is going to be? You've now got Morihiro Saito, you've got Kurt Yoshi. What are the relationship between Honolulu and Japan is going to be? As much as you could talk about...
What are you guys trying to do, put me on the spot? Well, I'll try to be diplomatic. Somebody might see this. Saito Sensei in some respects was almost part of the Ueshiba family. I mean, he and his wife, well, Saito Sensei, of course, was a very close student, but his wife was sort of like a servant of the Ueshiba family until they died, really. Hatsu was O-sensei's wife, and even though Sensei was moving around quite a bit, let's say starting from the mid-50s on, she stayed much of the time in Iwama. And so they really very much relied on the Saito family to look after O-sensei and his wife. And there were many times when O-sensei was kind of cranky as an old man, and he would get angry sometimes, and Saito Sensei talked about, and other people have told me the same story, they would sometimes call Iwama and have them call Honbu saying they needed O-sensei back there just so that O-sensei wouldn't be at the Honbu dojo to gum up the works, as it were. So, you go back to a very close relationship lasting over many years. There's some very profound technical differences. People evolve in different ways, they have different preferences. You can't really say that one is better than the other, or that one is right or wrong. It's basically what do you as an individual prefer? What do you want to study? What is meaningful to you? That's a decision that we're all making, throughout our Aikido careers. So I think Hitohiro Sensei wants to maintain a very good relationship with Honbu. Clarification of his status was made after Saito Sensei passed away last year, and he agreed to the wishes of Honbu Dojo, and he's very cognizant of his role in continuing the tradition. Even though his formal titles have changed, I think the Iwama Dojo and the training going on there is very much a continuation of what Saito Sensei was doing. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Would you mind just confirming what Hitohiro Sensei's position is going to be? Is the Saito family going to continue to be the keepers of the Aiki Jinja?
The question is, will the Saito family continue to be the keepers of the Aiki Jinja? Well, unless there's something dramatic happens where they're no longer living there, I think so. In a titular sense, Hitohiro Sensei is no longer the dojo sho. He's the representative of the dojo sho, who is now Morihei Sensei, the present doshu. And in a similar manner, he is not the guardian of the Aiki Jinja as Saito Sensei was. He is the sort of the representative of the guardian, who is again Morihei Sensei. So there's been the formality of the things have changed, but as I said, the daily activities are the same. And, who better than the Saito family would it be to look after the dojo and the shrine as well. So certainly for the foreseeable future, I would see that continue. Yes?
Given that so many different styles and also different people watching the same teacher because of their different life inputs. They're going to get different things out of it. But even at that, is it possible that O-sensei may have been telling people different things privately and showing them different things privately that caused them to go in so many different directions?
I'll try to summarize the question. Could you hear it? Okay. Okay. The question was, given the fact that there are many fundamentally different styles of Aikido, is it possible that O-sensei told or taught different things to different people over time? Times. I think there's a certain amount of truth to that, but you have to keep this in mind. The general notion of Aikido that we have comes, Aikido was not well known all over Japan in the pre-war era. It was not well known in Japan right after the war. It was not well known in Japan until maybe starting in the 70s or so. So it's a relatively recent phenomenon. The people who had the most impact on Aikido, the way it was practiced, are people like Ueshiba Kishimaru, certainly, Tohei Sensei, Shioda Sensei is another one, and to somewhat lesser degree the teachers of students of O-sensei who were, the important people before and after the war who remained active. So what you have, the way that Aikido was disseminated after the war all over the world was more the version and the vision of these people than it was that of O-sensei. We didn't really know what O-sensei did technically at all. And I forgot some of my closing comments. Maybe this is a good time for it. If it had not been for Saito Sensei and his conservative approach and his devotion in attempting to preserve O-sensei's Aikido, the concept of Takemusu Aiki, this spontaneous expression of martial techniques, this unlimited source of techniques, I don't think it would have had very much currency in the modern Aikido world. But it's because of Saito Sensei, through his books, through his extensive travels, emphasizing these points over and over again. He's certainly the one who stimulated me to study and document O-sensei to the extent that I have. And he's sort of like the pipe or the conduit between that, probably the apex of development of O-sensei in the period soon after the war, and conveying that knowledge to the modern era and seeing that it's preserved and hopefully will be conveyed to people in the future of Aikido. But his role as a bridge between O-sensei and the modern era, now the 21st century, is absolutely essential. We should really keep that in mind. Also, Saito Sensei's technical legacy and influence are immense. In the early days, if you talk about weapons, you talk about the kanto and boken, and you do a couple of boken techniques on your shodan test. That's all that we did. I'm talking like in the Toei system or the Home Dojo system of the 60s. But because Saito Sensei had formalized and elaborated to the extent he did this vast weapons repertoire and made it part and parcel of Aikido training, and then he went on to publish the books, the traditional Aikido books, a lot of books later, he framed the dialogue, if you will. In other words, if you say that weapons don't have a place in Aikido, you have to explain why they don't have a place, which is kind of hard to do, especially if I'm around. But he has put the spotlight on weapons training because, whether or not you think that O-sensei's weapons or Saito Sensei's were equivalent or of a value equal to the classical systems that had hundreds of years history, apart from that point, O-sensei attached great importance to weapons going back before the war. It's easy to document. This book documents it quite clearly. And so, in my role as a historian, certainly in Saito Sensei's role as a preserver of O-sensei's tradition, we have to emphasize and see that the weapons techniques continue, because that was what Sensei's vision. And you saw with Hitohiro Sensei's teaching, everything is the ken, it's all related to the ken, the movement of the hips, the body positions, the kokyu movement, all comes from the sword. That is the metaphor, if you will, for this way of moving the body and connecting the body and Aikido. It's absolutely essential in Sensei's interpretation. Now anyone is free to add other weapons or to only teach taijutsu. This is a personal subjective thing, and some people have done some very fine systems. But if you look at what the founder did, what he was thinking of, what he was planning, what he was working on, he was always trying something new, that was his vision. So I, as a historian, respect it, and Saito Sensei certainly respected it as, I don't think it's an exaggeration to call him his, Sensei's technical successor. Some people might argue with that, but I can hot talk on it too. Yes.
I have a question. Sorry, I don't know much. Do the weapons movements in Aikido are from traditional martial arts and applied to Aikido, or is we do Aikido and up the other way around?
The question regards really kind of the origin of the weapons techniques that we have in Aikido. Where did they come from? Follow me here. I'll give you a real capsule version. In 1937, O Sensei formally enrolled, he did what's called Kekpa, the blood oath, in the Kashima Shinto Ryu sword school. Well, it's a Sogo Budo, a composite martial system. And he didn't actually practice it, but what he did do is he had teachers from that school come to what was called the Kobukan Dojo, the old Hombu Dojo was called the Kobukan Dojo before the war. And Akazawa Sensei, the man I mentioned in connection with the Budo book, and Kishimaru Sensei, maybe one or two others, would take Sunday classes, and O Sensei would watch very, very carefully. And especially you'll see it in the Kumitachi of the Wama Aiki Ken, the first two movements are virtually identical to that sword school. And if you look at the third friendship demonstration, which we just remastered, I got the soke of the headmaster of that school, and he brought in his top students, and they did about a 40-minute demonstration of that school, and you can see the origins of the basic sword movements in the Kashima Shinto Ryu school. The Jo we're not so sure about. Kishomaru Sensei postulated that it probably was related to his spear training and use of the Jukendori, the Mothman air training when he was in the military, and also he practiced a lot of the spear by himself. But the Jo, it's a little hard to say where it came from technically. Maybe I'll entertain one more question. Yeah, the question has to do with where Saito Sensei fits in O Sensei's evolution in the creation of Aikido. Well, I don't know whether you say the middle to the end sort of thing, but 1946 is when he enrolled, and 1969 is when O Sensei died, and Saito Sensei was with him and close to him during that entire period. Now, I think you mentioned philosophy. Saito Sensei was not a philosopher, but he knew several of the Omoto chants that Saito Sensei used and watched him. Saito Sensei would maybe be kind of more of a philosopher along the lines of a Will Rogers, common sense philosophy. But he was not a religious person. He didn't speak in those terms. He didn't have that kind of a background. O Sensei's philosophical background is all intertwined with the Omoto religion. You have to get into that heavily to try to understand where he was coming from. Did I see your hand go up, Vince?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I just heard, when people ask Saito Sensei about philosophy, I heard him say, what do you feel when you're on the mat or in the training? And that's we learn the philosophy from practice.
That's it. Every once in a while, he would talk about the Budo of harmony or the Budo of love. And I heard him say that on any number of occasions. But, you know, he was a strong guy, he was a strong physical guy, he had almost a mathematical mind, he could visualize the techniques and be very precise in what he's doing. He was really a remarkable martial artist. And, but he was just not a philosopher, he was not a scholar, he didn't write really. You know, the books that he's written, as I said, he spoke into a tape recorder and we put it together and edited it, gave it back to him, he would make corrections, and that was the books. That's how it all happened. Okay, last question. Did I? The question was, did I ever meet O-sensei? No, I arrived 2 months to the day after O-sensei died. I arrived the day that his wife died. And, I think June 26, 1969, unfortunately. Well, okay, well, thank you very much for being such an attentive audience.